sweeps, motions. Retzlaff's throw. It's brought in by the tight end Rex, and then taken away by Oklahoma State, and that's the ball game. We're right there with the Cowboys for most of this game.
After review, the ruling on the field of fumble is confirmed. Game over.
Oklahoma State will play for a Big 12.
Okay, so I lied. This has been the best week of college football that I can remember. So many close games, near upsets or upsets, and just overall all-time classics. And we're going to break every single one down in today's video. But first, I'm going to show you guys my top 25, so let's get right into it. Alright guys, so here it is. As you can see, I have Michigan sitting at the number 1 spot. We're going to get into the Michigan-Ohio State game. And then I'm going to get into why I have them above Georgia, Georgia's performance against Georgia Tech, and my reasoning and all that. But first, let's talk about the game. Michigan, they beat Ohio State 30-23 in Ann Arbor. I'm personally very impressed at the resilience that this team had to keep their composure, even with the injuries and all the stuff going on in the background. Everyone's saying that they aren't a great team when they are a deep team. They're deep, they're great. And this whole team is filled up with just like seniors. Like there's so many draft picks going on this team. Next year's Michigan team, honestly, I believe is going to be very bad. And when I mean very bad, they're probably going to be like 8-4 or something along those lines. But first, I want to talk about Ohio State and how they played in this game. Honestly, I was shocked how unprepared Ohio State was after the last 2 years happened, especially on defense. They do have a better defense, but it's still the same thing over and over again. They weren't able to stop Michigan in the run. It's the same thing from the last 2 years. They were not able to do what was needed to win this game. On that last drive where Michigan just drove down the field, all they did was run the ball. Ohio State knew they were only going to run the ball, but they could not stop it. And that's absolutely what let Michigan win this game. And that's without the 2 interceptions that Kyle McCord threw. Kyle McCord is not an Ohio State quarterback. The type of offensive talent that this team has, they need a better quarterback. I expect him not to play next year. I do think Ohio State will have a new quarterback because Kyle just can't do it. He cannot step up in the big moments. He makes too many mistakes. Then another thing that hindered Ohio State this entire game was the special teams. Every punt was like 30 yards and they missed a field goal. And it's just a bunch of things that can't happen if you're going to beat a top 3 team in the country. And the thing that's super crazy about it, Michigan's defense wasn't even all that good in this game. Ohio State was able to drive the ball down the field most of the time and get open receivers regularly throughout this game. But when it came time to make the big plays, Michigan made those big plays, and Ohio State didn't make any of them. And that's why they lost. They only lost by 6 points. But that means all the difference. I know there were a lot of calls. A lot of people on Twitter and on YouTube were talking about like the missed calls, the missed fumble in the end zone, or interception, I should say, which 100% was an interception. Roman Wilson did not have control of that ball, and Denzel Burke definitely picked that off in the end zone. It's a missed call. There's nothing you could do about it. Then people were talking about there was holding the whole game. I didn't see a ton of holding. There were a few plays where it should have been called on each side of the ball, Ohio State and Michigan, but I think Michigan was committing more of those holds that weren't being called. But anyway, I'm not going to take anything away from Michigan in this game. They played a really good, really solid game. They fought hard the entire time. Do I think they're the better team? No, I think Ohio State's better than they were. But they gritted it out and they won this game without their head coach. So congratulations, Michigan, you're at the number 1 spot. And at the 2nd spot, I have the Georgia Bulldogs. They rolled up to Georgia Tech and only won 31-23 against a sad Georgia Tech team. I don't know what it is with Georgia with playing down to their opponents, but I cannot reason Michigan beating a top 2 team in the country by 6 points, but putting Georgia ahead of them for beating a very bad Georgia Tech team by only 8 points. And that is the reason why I have Michigan number 1 and Georgia number 2. Then moving on to number 3, we have the Civil War in Washington. Washington versus Washington State. Washington won that game 24-21. I don't know what it is about Washington, but they're kind of like Georgia. They play down to their opponents, but when they play a team that's like on their level or close, they rise to the occasion and they find out a way to win. I know it's a rivalry game and rivalry games are close, but when you have Michael Penix Jr., you have Rome Odunze, you have that wide receiver core, and you're finding a run game, you cannot almost lose to a team like Washington State that has zero defense at all. You just can't let that happen. But regardless, I think they're better than Florida State. They won that game. Florida State comes right behind them. They won against their in-state rival Florida 24-15, both without their starting quarterbacks. But Florida State, they did go to Florida, they won that game, and they stay undefeated. Now they get to play Louisville, which lost to Kentucky earlier. We're going to get into that game. And Louisville's chances to actually knock off Florida State since they're missing their starting quarterback, Jordan Travis, and how that's going to affect them. And then finally, closing out the top 5, I do have Ohio State as the best one-loss team. They're 100% the best one-loss team. You can argue them or Oregon. Oregon's been looking very dominant this whole year. But the only good team, like with a pulse, well, I should say 2 teams. They've played Utah and Oregon State, but Utah is not ranked because they haven't been consistent this entire season. And then Oregon State, they're just falling off because of their lack of offense. And then I really do value Ohio State's strength of record. They have the 6th best strength of record in the country right now. That's the best in the country in general, while Oregon is nowhere close to that. And that's why I have Oregon sitting at the 6th spot. But they did beat Oregon State, like I said earlier, 31-7 off of Bo Nix's amazing performance. He threw 2 touchdowns, almost 400 yards. He was 33 for 40 against Oregon State's defense, and Oregon State was supposed to have a good defense. But I really think Bo Nix is going to win the Heisman, if not Jaden Daniels. He's just so efficient, and this team is humming in every right position and every right direction. I think they're going to roll into the Pac-12 championship game and completely dismantle Washington. I think they're going to win by 2 or 3 scores. I really do. The only question I have to ask Oregon is their pass defense. I don't think their pass defense is that good, and if Washington has a really good game, they can tear up their secondary all day long. But I do think Oregon can score on literally every possession against Washington, and that's why I'm going to pick them to win that game. Then moving on to 7th spot, we have the Texas Longhorns. They win against their in-state rival Texas Tech. They won the game 57-7. Now Texas Tech is missing their starting quarterback. He is in the transfer portal, so it makes sense that they were able to score how they did against Texas Tech. But I really did not see them winning by 50, maybe by like 21, 24, something like that. 50 is just kind of crazy. Arch Manning got to see his first reps in a Longhorns uniform, and apparently he might even transfer as well, since he's going to be behind Quinn Ewers if he comes back next year, and then their backup Malik Murphy. But we're just going to have to find out. And then right behind them we have the Iron Bowl, Auburn versus Alabama. Alabama beat them 27-24, and honestly, I have no words to say to Auburn fans. After that muffed punt, you gave the game to Alabama. You had that game basically won, but in Auburn fashion, they lost after a mistake that they just could not afford. You cannot make that error and beat a team like Alabama when you're as bad as Auburn is this year. They have 0 offense. They were able to run the ball all day against Alabama, which really shocked me. I didn't think they'd be able to move the ball at all, because I thought Alabama would understand that Auburn can't throw the ball, so they would sell out to the run. But I was absolutely wrong. And I'm also going to say something I've been saying all year. Yes, Alabama has been better, but I still think they have a lot of kinks in their game. Jalen Milroe has played better, but this was just not a great performance by this offense or defense. And if Alabama comes out playing like this against Georgia, they're going to get obliterated. Now, for a Nick Saban-led team, I don't see them getting obliterated, but if they play like this, which I don't think they will come and they will give it their best shot, and it'll be a really good game. It's going to be a long day for Alabama in that defense. Carson Beck is going to rip them apart, and Georgia's going to go on to win their 2nd straight SEC championship against Alabama. Then moving on to the 9th spot, we have Penn State. They played Michigan State. They won that game 42-0. Drew Aller threw like a 70-yard touchdown pass in this game, and it's not like there wasn't anything after the catch. He just bombed the ball 70 yards. Dude caught it and scored. Now, Michigan State has the worst secondary I've ever seen for like the past 3 or 4 years now, but this has to be a step in the right direction for Drew Aller and Penn State's offense, since they weren't able to throw the ball at all earlier in the season. And hopefully next year they're going to be really good. I have high hopes for the Nittany Lions. They're bringing back a lot. Drew Aller's going to have a year under his belt. The running backs are going to be back, and Penn State's going to have a good defense. They're also going to have a new offensive coordinator, so we're going to have to watch out and just see what happens with this team. And then rounding out the top 10, I have Missouri that absolutely obliterated Arkansas. They won that game 48-14. KJ Jefferson threw 2 passes. I think he got hurt only for 2 yards. But I just want to talk about Cody Schrader for a second. 217 yards rushing against this Razorbacks defense. Absolutely crazy. And then the real reason that Arkansas lost, turnovers. They fumbled the ball 5 times. 5 times. And you know what? Missouri scored on every single one of them. That's the reason they won this game, especially in blowout fashion. I wanted to put Missouri above Penn State after I saw that score, but after I watched the game and saw what happened, Arkansas basically beat themselves. They didn't even give themselves a chance to compete in this game. While on the other hand, Penn State absolutely dominated from the beginning to end of the game against Michigan State. So that's why I got Penn State at 9 and Missouri at 10. Then sitting at the 11th spot, we have the Tulane Green Wave. They win and beat UTSA 29-16, just winning week in and week out. Their only loss was against Ole Miss without their starting quarterback, and they almost won that game. So there's not much I can say about this Tulane team other than they're resilient and they keep winning every week. Even if they're playing down to their opponents, they are still winning. They're 11-1. Proud of the Green Wave. They're probably going to end up going to a Near Six Bowl again this year. And then after them, we have our first 3-loss team, Arizona. Arizona's been on an absolute tear. I don't know what's gotten into this team, but they have completely flipped the script this year. They won their game Saturday 59-23 against Arizona State, albeit Arizona State's not that good. But this is an Arizona State team that only let Washington score 15 points and they almost won that game. Arizona put up 59 on them like it was nothing. Noah Fifita, their quarterback, he threw for 5 touchdowns, over 500 yards. Honestly, Arizona is the team to look out for next year. I would not be shocked if Arizona is ranked in the top 15 or even the top 10 to start of next year. And then talking about improving teams, we have Oklahoma. They're sitting at the 13th spot after they played a basketball game against TCU. They won that game 69-45. This is the highest scoring game I've seen this year. 114 points were scored. 114. Let me read you guys these stats. 207 rushing yards for Oklahoma, 400 passing yards, 344 passing yards for TCU, 176 rushing yards. Dylan Gabriel threw for 3 touchdowns and a pick, and Josh Hoover, he threw for 4 touchdowns and a pick. And honestly, TCU almost came back. They made a late surge in the third quarter, but in the fourth quarter, Oklahoma was able to pull it all back together, and they were able to win this game by 24 points. They won by 24 while giving up 45. Absolutely crazy. And not to mention, TCU is now 5-7, and they aren't competing in a bowl game right after playing in the national championship. That is crazier than anything I've said about this game so far. And then right after them, we have Ole Miss. I have them sitting at the 14th spot. They played Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. They won that game 17-7. Honestly, very sloppy game on both sides. Will Rogers was actually able to play the Notre Dame does and one more win. That's all there is to it. Then moving on to the 18th spot, I have the Liberty Flames. They won their game 42-28 against UTEP. They just keep the good times rolling. They're 12-0, going on to play in their conference championship game. And there's really not much to say about this Liberty team. They've been resilient. Their defense hasn't been that good this year, but their offense is practically unbeatable, especially for the teams they're playing and the type of schedule they have. No one's going to be able to stop them. They ran for 441 yards and only passed for 28 yards in this game, and they were still 11-1 and not gonna be able to play in a bowl game. That absolutely needs to change. You have to reward a team for playing this good. I don't care what the circumstances. Put James Madison in a bowl game. And then rounding out the top 20, I have the Iowa Hawkeyes. They got a walk-off win over Nebraska, 13-10. And to everyone's surprise, Iowa is 10-2. They've been on a roll after Cade McNamara got benched earlier in the season. Deacon Hill is actually a decent quarterback for this team, but they're about to go into the Big Ten championship game and get destroyed by Michigan like they were last year. But it was a good season. Iowa, they're going to end it 10-3. Hopefully when they hire a new offensive coordinator, everything goes smoothly for them next year. And then after them, I have Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State won a thriller against BYU in double overtime. 40-34, BYU turned the ball over on their last possession. Absolutely heartbreaking. If they were able to get that touchdown, they were able to go for 2. They could have won that game and upset Oklahoma State at home. And that would have been Oklahoma playing Texas in the Big 12 championship game. But instead, we have Texas and Oklahoma State. In that game, Texas is going to absolutely destroy this team. Oklahoma State is not that good. Their defense is absolutely awful. They have a good running back, but that's about all I could say about this team. And moving on from them, we have SMU. SMU, they've been on a win streak recently. I think they have 7 wins in a row. They might have 7 or 8 wins in a row. They beat Navy 59-14. Preston Stone threw for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Solid game for SMU. They're definitely deserving to be in the top 25. And then right behind them is another team that deserves to be in the top 25. We have the 11-1 Toledo Rockets. and they beat Central Michigan over this weekend 32-17. Toledo's been on a tear this year, and I didn't think this team would be that good. I thought like top end, maybe 8-3, but they've shown that they're capable of something special. The only loss they had was 30-28 to Illinois, and that was the first game of the year. They've won 11 straight. This team is truly surprising. Daquan Finn, their quarterback, he is willing this team to victory. And then right after Toledo, we have North Carolina State. They beat their in-state rival, North Carolina, 39-20. I don't know what happened to Drake May, but he really just let the ball go this year. He was not really good. Everyone thought he could have won the Heisman and that he'd be like a top 5 draft pick. I don't think he's top 5 draft pick worthy, especially after seeing this team this year. He has a really good offense, but he continues to make mistakes, and North Carolina State took advantage of those mistakes. He threw 2 picks in this game, but nonetheless, North Carolina State, welcome back to the top 25. And then rounding out the top 25, I have Oregon State. Oregon State, as you guys know, they lost to Oregon 31-7. This team is just completely fallen off. I know they had a backloaded season with Washington, which is a team they should have beat, but then getting destroyed by Oregon like this, I think that they're a fringe top 25 team with 4 losses with that terrible offense and a little bit of an overrated defense. Then not to mention, I think this is their last year being decent because their head coach actually got hired to be Michigan State's new head coach starting next year. But enjoy it while it lasts, Oregon State. You guys are going off to the Mountain West next year. Good luck. And there you have it, guys. That is my top 25. I do want to talk about championship week a little bit. So as you guys know, we're going to have Texas and Oklahoma State. I already said who I think is going to win that game. I think Texas is going to win that game. Oregon's going to beat Washington for the Pac-12. I think Georgia's going to beat Alabama, and Michigan is going to beat Iowa. Now the game to look out for me is still Louisville and Florida State, because I think Louisville has a really big chance to beat Florida State, especially with a second string quarterback. And personally, I think it's going to happen. I think Louisville is going to give Florida State their first loss, and they are going to be out of the college football playoff. And my college football playoff, I think it's going to be Michigan number 2, Georgia 1, Oregon 3, and Texas at the 4th spot. And honestly, I don't know who's going to win the national championship. I think it's between Georgia and Oregon personally. I think Oregon is just a well-rounded team, and Georgia is Georgia. They're really good. I don't think Michigan's going to really get far. I think they're going to lose to Oregon in the first round just because I don't think Michigan is really that great of a team. I mean, obviously, they spent the last 3 years cheating the entire season, which is going to give me to my last point of this video. Jim Harbaugh, you are 0-5 against Ohio State once these sanctions come through. And every Michigan fan is going to be crying on the floor, whining day in and day out, year after year, once all those games get vacated because they cheated. But anyway, that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like and comment, and I'll catch you guys next week after championship weekend. Peace out.